For more than 100 centuries, the Emperor has sat immobile on the golden throne of Earth. He is the master of mankind. By the might of his inexhaustible armies, a million worlds stand against the dark. Yet, he is a rotting carcass, the Kyrian Lord of the Imperium, held in life by marvels from the dark age of technology and the 1,000 souls sacrificed each day so that his may continue to burn. To be a man in such times is to be one amongst untold billions. It is to live in the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable. It is to suffer an eternity of carnage and slaughter. It is to have cries of anguish and sorrow drowned by thirsting laughter of dark gods. It is a dark and terrible era where you find little comfort or hope. Forget the power of technology and science. Forget the promise of progress and advancement. Forget any notion of common humanity or compassion. There is no peace amongst the stars, for in the grim dark universe of the far future, there is only war. And these are the first words you're introduced to when opening a book into the universe of Warhammer 40k. Warhammer 40k. It's a universe that has almost been around for 40 years at this point. Get it? 40, like one of the 40k, get it? Like one of the Warhammers for, and it's something that has always been adjacent to my life on the internet. I've heard so many terms been thrown around, like blood for the blood god, skull for the skull throne, for the emperor, and some Horus guy committing some heresy or something like that. I knew it was from Warhammer. I've always kind of known of the existence of Warhammer, but I just never engaged with it. I never took the time to sit down and like play the games, learn about the tabletop, read any of the books. That just never came around. It was always something I was mildly interested in because you look over and see these space marines that look cool killing a bunch of aliens. You're like, that's cool, that is so awesome, I want to get into it. I hear about this emperor guy that's like really some weird god being entity, and I was like, that seems cool, I wonder what's his whole deal about. I would want to get to that eventually. But then, eventually never actually came around. That was until a friend from work learned about my mild interest of Warhammer. They just so happened to be a whole encyclopedia of Warhammer, reading a large chunk of the Black Library catalog, an avid tabletop gamer, and this whole thing is just like a perfect storm of me actually getting into it, and they were also equally disappointed that I had zero clue of what actually was happening in universe. So they calmly pointed me towards a place that seems to be the general consensus on where everyone should start when they really want to get into Warhammer, and that being. But before we get a little too far ahead of ourselves, I'm the Dreadful DM, or Jordan, and thank you so much for taking the time to watch my silly little video. And today, I want to talk to you about my first experience with Warhammer and our Inquisitor EISENHORN. That requires a little bit of context before we jump straight into the first book, Xenos, so if that's more what you're interested in, you can just click the timestamp like here or in the description or wherever, so you can just go talk about the review of the book. But I'm going to do a little bit of preamble just so we know where we kind of stand when I'm entering this. The EISENHORN series is written by one Dan Abnett, who has a very large extensive catalog both within the Warhammer universe and outside of it in different properties like Marvel and such. Though for the time being, I'm going to focus on EISENHORN since that's the topic of this video. It has 3 main entries, Xenos, Malice, and Hereticus, with a bunch of short stories attached along, and then a 4th book that happened a lot later and it was kind of weirdly attached that I have mixed feelings about, but we'll cross that bridge whenever we get to it. And today I want to focus on the first book of the series, that being Xenos. Originally released in 2001, it follows the story of one Gregor EISENHORN, an Inquisitor of the Imperium, and how an early adventure in his career really set him up for a lot of pain and suffering later on in his life. EISENHORN and Dan Abnett in general sit in a very interesting spot in the timeline of Warhammer in general. With EISENHORN and another series by Dan Abnett, Gaunt's Ghost, it really helped flesh out the universe that is Warhammer that we see today, with very simple terms that we'll see in the story like Vox, glow sticks, and generally how the writing style is presented and how the universe is lived in all came really from Dan Abnett and EISENHORN and other projects that Dan was writing at the time. He helped pull Warhammer from just the endless bloodlust and fighting of space marines and the guardmen and everything like this, and really brought us to the day-to-day activities within the Imperium, within the upper echelons of the government and stuff like that. It really shows the inner workings of everything, so it's not just only blood for the blood god and skull for the skull throne, but what the Inquisition was and what they do do, and all the different terms and different factions and all this good business that really help flesh out Warhammer. So that's probably why EISENHORN is one of the first things that's thrown at newcomers, because it shows the foundation of what Warhammer is, and it slowly introduces us into this Imperium of Man. Thank you again for watching this video. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, but let's stop yapping about what's happened all around the universe of Warhammer, and let's actually get into it. So without a further ado, let's take a step into the very treacherous world of one Inquisitor, Gregor EISENHORN, with the first book in the series, Xenos. Our story starts off with a picture recording, which is basically showing CCTV footage of a fellow Inquisitor, not EISENHORN, and his ally chasing after someone known as Quinios. I'm gonna suck at pronouncing these like space fantasy names, so be patient with me. And they're chasing after this guy, and they're yelling after him like, "This is the end, we're gonna catch you." Then all of a sudden, the Inquisitor's friend gets slaughtered. And it's like, oh hell, what's going on? And then the Inquisitor gets slaughtered, and then a very shadowy figure known as Trinibal, it presents himself in front of the CCTV camera and then just kind of cuts it off, and that's where we're left there. Very ambiguous, not too much explaining going on behind it. The main story starts off with our protagonist, EISENHORN, a young Inquisitor at the age of 42, strong build at the very prime of his career, which just sounds weird for saying someone who's 42, but people tend to live a lot longer than usual through some various means, to say the least. So at this point in time, it would probably be a very apt moment to explain what Inquisitor is and what they do for the Imperium. They are the secret police, making sure that all threats of humanity, inside out, are squashed, and that the status quo remains the same. They hold an unparalleled amount of power, and what they say goes. They can get any information, they can bypass any security clearance. They are responsible for making sure everything is safe, and they are treated as such. And they are split into 3 different orders: Xenos, Malus, and Hereticus, and our boy EISENHORN is part of Ordo Xenos. Future Jordan here, sorry about that, but a small interruption because I forgot to mention one of the most important aspects about the Inquisition, that being the 2 main schools of thought, Puritans and Radicals. Puritans believe that anything against humanity, chaos, Xenos, heretics, anything possibly related to them should be snuffed out, because the only thing that should remain in the universe is humanity, and we shouldn't agree with them, we shouldn't combine with them, we shouldn't let them change us, influence us. There's no room for that. Only humanity shall stand. But Radicals believe that, well, if I can use chaos magic, if I can use Xenos technology, if I can work with heretics to win the day, then it's okay, because as long as humanity still survives at the end of the day, my mission is complete. And that's where the whole ideological rift comes in, and there's a lot of infighting when it comes to that. And it will show throughout this story, and we'll see how EISENHORN, a Puritan of the Amalathian branch, which is a very Puritan-like section of the Inquisition, and we'll see how that changes and how he might forego some things, change in some aspects, and how that plays out in this story. But back to the video. Currently, EISENHORN is chasing down someone, a man named Iclone, that he's been really wanting for the last 6 years, and he's been wanting to bring him to justice for his crimes against the Imperium. And that has led him to a very interesting planet called Hubris, which is very on the nose for everything that happens to EISENHORN, but nonetheless, he has chased down this guy to the cryogenic hibernation pods for this planet. The reason for these cryogenic pods, hibernation pods, is because the planet is on a 29-month solar cycle, and 11 of those months they are quite far from the planet, so it gets very cold and there's not too much to do. So the nobles of the planet have decided to spend those 11 months in hibernation, so they skip the boring, cold part of everything and skip to the fun stuff, and they can celebrate and do all the noble things during that small period of time before they go back into hibernation. So back to EISENHORN. He and his companion, Lors Vibin, a young woman, are being led to these hibernation pods by a bunch of custodians who are not to be confused with the other custodians in the universe. These guys are just responsible for maintaining the hibernation pods and making sure nothing bad happens to the nobles while they're in cryogenic sleep. But by the time they get there, they find 4 dead custodians, so EISENHORN and Vibin decide to go in while the other 4 kind of hang back and get, raise their alarms and alert everyone that something's going down in the cryopods. Both EISENHORN and Vibin decide to enter. They decide to split up into this very cold and dimly lit cryogenic space. EISENHORN pulling out his power sword, which is kind of seems like a lightsaber the way it's described, but That we won't call it that, we call it a power sword here. But they split up, trying to hopefully maybe catch Iclon's men off guard and see what they're doing. Unfortunately, they are ambushed by the men, so they quickly have to dispatch the people. Eisenhorn quickly deals some quick blows to his enemies, knocking one of them out, and he's like, okay, we're good. Unfortunately for him, though, he hears this blood-curdling scream come from one of the following halls. He runs over there, sees 8 dead of Iclon's men and around, but also sees his friend Vibin shot and killed. Blood already frozen onto the ground, congealed mess, and he looks down, sees his friend that's probably not the first time he's lost a companion this way. Looks at the weapon she was holding and says it's the gun that's going to kill Iclon, picks it up, racks it, and keeps moving. Also at this point, Eisenhorn is very much described as a stoic person, someone who's not much feeling. His mission for the Emperor, for the Imperium man, comes before anything else. He's human, but he doesn't have any human emotions. He doesn't feel. All he wants is to get results and make sure everything maintains the status quo. But it's very obvious that he is human and he can't really change that, can't really, affect that. So he sees like his dead friend, so he feels some sort of way. He reacts humanly, he has these very emotional reactions to things, despite how much he says like, no, I am above that. I am a inquisitor for the Emperor. He very much still is human and he still lets his emotion gets in the way plenty of times, even though he likes to pretend that he's above that and that he doesn't show any emotion towards anyone. At this point, he decides to vox in a message to his pilot, which is basically radioing a message to his pilot saying like, hey, Vimit is dead and the situation has evolved. And in this, he also shows that he has a personal verbal cipher that he uses for all his companions, a glossia that he calls it. That's basically meant to mask what they're saying, so if someone taps into his radios, into his voxes, they won't be able to tell like, oh, he's here, he's there. He'll just see like Aegis Wing flying high, and it's like, what does that mean? They might be able to decipher it after a little bit, but in the spur of the moment when they hear that, they're like, wait, what? Or something. So it basically covers his tracks and gives us time to get messages across, and especially if people are not too knowledgeable on anything on his techniques, he can very easily communicate with companions and get messages across that, hey, I need air support, hey, I need this, yo, this happened, let's hurry this up. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or Q, whatever it may be. Future Jordan, sorry, one more small interruption. I mentioned just the pilot, but that pilot being Midas Benticor, which is one of the longest standing allies of Eisenhorn, the closest thing to a best friend that he has. So that's probably pretty important to mention, because for an Inquisitor to have a very strong confidant like a Midas Benticor, it's a pretty big deal for him, and we'll see how the relationship changes, might morph into different ways, and how that might end up in the different stories. So yeah, let's back to the video, sorry. So after this, he pushes forward, trying to get Iclone, fighting and dodging all these different types of people, doesn't know where they're coming from, dimly lit halls, it's dark, it's not the best situation for a fight, and trying to find someone. And during all this, Iclone decides to start the thawing process for the nobles. So during this middle of a fight, or during all this, you have people stumbling out on these cryogenic parts, uncared for, they're all frozen little bodies, and they're just flopping on the floor. So these people who are meant to be cared for during this long process of thawing are just stumbling out, falling into a middle of fights and battles, and see them getting absolutely shredded or just being uncared for because the custodians aren't there. So people are just gonna die during this, a whole sort of people. So after pushing through Iclone's men and trying to chase him down, we introduced to the term of a psyker. We find out Eisenhorn is himself a psyker. It's someone who has these psychonic abilities that are able to influence people, transport messages into them, images, be able to influence the feelings, stuff like that, command them in different types of ways depending on how fragile the mind is, stuff like this. And we find out that Eisenhorn himself is a psyker, and that's something that's been given to them via like being touched by the warp, but that's a whole different thing. It's something that's related heavily into the Warhammer universe, but we'll get to that whole thing once we're introduced to a different character a little bit later on. So yeah, but we found out he has these psychic abilities, and he's going against Iclone, who is a much stronger psychic than he, so he has to kind of make sure we'll hit the psychic attacks that Iclone is throwing at them, that he's able to be resilient and not succumb to one of his mind tricks. And so he's fighting through it, and Iclone attempts to do one of these, but he almost picks out a cover, but he's like, wait, let me just go back to my training. He breaks it, keeps moving, and he's like, wait, let me do this on Iclone's man. He says, get out, and a bunch of his people just stand up out of cover like, what? And they just get blasted by him. So it's cool little nifty tricks. Sometimes it can be very helpful for someone like an Inquisitor who's meant to be interrogating people, getting information for people and stuff like this, able to influence them. So this is something that Eisenhorn uses a lot throughout his adventures, and something he will heavily rely on, especially later in his career. At this point, Eichel is just trying to escape. He seems to have gotten what he wanted from this whole adventure, and now he's just trying to, boot scoot and boogie out of here. So he's running away. He's going to the upper decks and seems to be going towards the, landing pad where all the ships come in and such. So he can, make a very quick escape. And EISENHORN is chasing after him, climbing up as well to the upper decks, and he gets to this open area that has a very noticeable large casket that is filled to the brim with different circuitry, wires, different import and export output ports, just everything is very weird, interesting. It's like, that's not usual, that's probably shouldn't be here, I'll note that and I'll come back for it. So then he quickly just runs down the hall and he gets a radio message from his boy Midas saying like, yo, there's a ship up here, it's probably his, I can take it down. And he's like, yep, go for it, destroy that shit. And he does. All, of course, this is all being told in Glossier, so it's all encrypted. So he says some weird stuff like 8-inch pattern, bimbity bombity boo, or whatever the hell he says during that moment. So yeah, good fun times for EISENHORN. Eichlon's men then are standing at the landing pad ready to get picked up, happy to escape this crazy man EISENHORN. Unfortunately for them, Midas took down the ship and he sweeps by and they're happy and they realize, oh, that's not our guy. Midas raises into EISENHORN, is like, yo, can I take these guys out? It's a little bit apparent throughout the entire section here that he seemed to have a very soft spot for Vivian. So hearing that she died and now that he has opportunity to kind of mow down the rest of them that were responsible for her death, yeah, he has a very cathartic release while doing it. He's very happy about it. Eichlon sees all his men just become red mist. He's like, you know what? I'm not going to let that happen to me. Tries to run back down the hatch, get back into the cryogenic pods, maybe try to do a little roundabout move on EISENHORN, get out of the planet. By the time he gets down to the hatch though, EISENHORN already has the gun, Vibin's gun, deep into his mouth, ready to pull the trigger. And he's explained that he pulls it and then the hammer gets flung into the top of his thing, breaks out of his mouth, breaks his jaw, blood comes splattering in the back, and then his man he's been chasing for 6 years is now dead. Now after all the chaos, it's a little bit of downtime for the guys to make sure to kind of regather what's happening here, and we're introduced to another character, his very, very old savant, not in terms of how many years he's been with him, but in the age that he is. Uber Amos. He is a man that is 276 years old. Remember when I told you that age works very differently in Warhammer? Yeah, that's why 42 is the prime of someone. So this man has been affected with the meme virus. But yes, a meme virus in this case just means that he has an insatiable lust to just get more and more knowledge. So constantly throughout different parts of the books and different later entries, in different like stories, Malice and Red, I guess he's still always, when he's nervous or just idly standing by, he's like, oh, the paint on this wall, it's been like, that was used by 200 years of the previous civilization when they used, and it was just randomly, it's like, oh yeah, so when he goes off to space, he's just constantly soaking up data. So that's something with him. So he's a very good, useful asset for EISENHORN, because when you have someone who just wants to collect as much information as possible, and you're a man that wants as much information as possible, yeah, that's a very good pairing, I would say. And looking for him, he already has a good standing with him because he used to previously be in the service of EISENHORN's master, Hapshat, who recently died because of brain worms. So that's fun. I think it was cerebral worm, something like that. So that's always a good time. The Warhammer universe is unforgiving and no one finds any love or hope. EISENHORN introduces Amos to this casket that he found during his chase with Eichlon. And he's like, hey, is this Xenos, aka is it alien? What is it? Do you have any idea? Uber looks at it and he's like, no, it's not Xenos, but it is man-made, but heavily modified because, with the extra ports, circuitry, different tubing and all this, typically it's not your normal casket. So it's like, yeah, but I'm not sure how to do anything else with it at this current moment. I don't have the tools, or I just don't have the knowledge about it. So let's bring it onto the gunship so we can, learn about it and we can further investigate it during our own pace and not during this very troubling moment for the whole world. That's probably a good situation. So yeah, they bring it onto the gun cutter and they're like, okay, let's get out of here. Unfortunately for them, they have to deal with the actual officials of this world. At this point, the custodians have been alerted what's happening at the hibernation pods. They rush over there and they see a bunch of their nobles are already dead or in the process of dying from the thawing process starting too early and not being cared for properly. They see some of them absolutely eviscerated during the whole process. This whole thing has been blown up and everyone is just running around not sure what's going on. They see a bunch of Eichlon's men, they see Vibin, they're like, what the hell? And they run over there and they see EISENHORN and they're like, you caused this, you're the one responsible for all this, so you're arrested and you're not leaving the world and you're coming with me. Unluckily for them, luckily for EISENHORN, he's an Inquisitor, so he just flashes the badge and says, no, I am Inquisitor of the Imperium for mankind, Emperor, all that good business, I will not be doing that, and good day. No, but Eisenhower likes to play a lot more ball with these worlds, with the working governments. Even though Inquisitor does have a lot of power and can basically say what they want and have whatever done in a moment's notice, he likes to be a lot more forthcoming, a lot more in a working relationship with these different type of governments from different worlds, because it makes his life a little bit easier. Of course, he can go brandishing his badge everywhere, saying, I want this done, I want this done, but he understands that can be a very easy way for people to shut off and very conveniently leave out important pieces of information and slow down your work, and maybe eventually get there, but it will come at a much slower process. So he likes to be more subtle, a lot more tactful with things, and make sure that he does have a working relationship with these particular people, because you know a bunch of the nobles did explode and die essentially, or were left frozen on the floor. So he's like, you know what, I'll come back with a report that everything that's happened, present it to you, and then we can work this whole thing out, because I don't want, you know, you to be left with sour taste in your mouth. Essentially, be a little more courtesy, work with the people, not be actively against them. So after absolutely frame mogging, you know, the custodians, give him the ASU frat boy treatment, they retreat back to their ship, they get the casket, they get Vivid, and they try to regroup and understand what the hell's going on. They ask the question, how did iClone make it on the planet undetected, unnoticed? They look through different transcripts, through different messages, through different manuscripts, manifests, all this, trying to see if there's any inkling to see how this guy kind of snuck onto here and how we can, you know, figure out where the hell to go next. And they try to gather more information. And at this point, we're introduced to the astropath for Eisenhorn, a man named as Lowlink. And this comes to the back to the warp talk, and I'm gonna get into that right now. To keep it simple, the warp is hell. It is a second dimension in the Warhammer universe where it influences people. It gives the people the ability to be psychers. It gives the people the ability to travel, do all this stuff. But at the same time, it is a manifestation of everything evil. It is where chaos resides. It's where all the bad things in the universe tend to live, and people don't want to like it. People don't want to interact with it, but we have to use it to travel, because in this universe, people don't travel via like faster than light, you know, speed. They don't do warp drive. They don't do anything like this. Well, they have a kind of warp drive, but instead of the cool one where you see like cool bright lights going through those like stars, no, you tear a hole in reality, enter hell, that reality closes, you travel, tear another hole in reality, and exit. It is so fun times, something that people don't want to use, actively hate, but we use it to travel, and that leads into a bunch of issues, but at the same time it gives us psychers and lets us, you know, travel the universe. So it's a very, you know, double-edged sword there. So Eisenhorn asks Lowlink, hey, can you send these messages, get this information, everything? I need to send this encryption and all this good business. Lowlink, being his old grangly little white guy, is like, okay, and goes back into his dim lit room to not be so overstimulated, into his astropath business. And this whole time they've been talking about Vibin, like, they're upset with it because they lost a good friend, a good fighter, and all this, and they're like, I'm not sure what she really wanted, we didn't know her wishes, and they're gonna go investigate a little bit further because they want to give her a proper send-off, because she was a friend and was very important to them. You know, despite the life of Inquisitor, Eisenhorn shows himself to be a very stoic, not really caring man. You know, the will of the Emperor and the Imperium comes first. It is very obvious he is still human. He is still just a man and is trying his best to not be a man. And it's very hard, it's a very difficult thing. And there's many times throughout this story, throughout other stories, throughout many different times in Warhammer where people are put into these positions where they're not supposed to act humanly. They're supposed to act for this God Emperor of mankind, but it's obvious that they just can't do that because they have love for people. They love their friends, love their family, significant others, all this. And that's really going to happen and show its cracks in Eisenhorn in different ways throughout this story, especially throughout the future stories of his adventures. The following day, Eisenhorn gets ready to present this report to the people, to the custodians, to be like, hey, this is what happened the night before, iClone did this, yada yada yada. Essentially, so he can be in a working relationship with the government. Because while he is an Inquisitor, like I said, he doesn't want to have these guys on his back. He's looking after iClone and wants to understand where he came from, and what cult he was part of. Because obviously this guy was doing some stuff that doesn't seem too good for the mankind, and he wants to make sure he puts the kibosh on that. And he wants to be sure that he doesn't have other players that are actively going against him. So he wants to be in a good working relationship. So he provides a report. He brings Uber with him, Amos, so he has his savant with him. So he's very smart, so just in case he can back him up. Get there, they're very, you know, dressed professionally to show maybe a little bit of honor, a little bit of respect, and then during the situation, they notice that all the fellow custodians are basically wearing mourning garb that is supposed to be represent that something bad happened. You know, symbols of the emperor, very something solemnly worn, because something like this happened, losing a large chunk of your noble population doesn't really happen all that often, especially in one night. So they're all dressed in mourning for this event. Eisenhorn and Amos arrive, they're ready to present the report, but as soon as they show up, they're already being accused. They're being like, you did this, you brought Icon here for this final battle, you're the reason why all our noble people are dead. Not all of them, but a large chunk of them are dead. Everything bad that happened is because of you, and you're going to be arrested, and you're not going to be allowed to leave off world, yada yada this, yada yada that. And basically Eisenhorn has to, you know, frame log him again, give him the ASU frat boy treatment, and be like, nope, you know what, I'm Inquisitor of the Imperium. Flashes badge, puts his foot down, is like, here's my report, here's what happened, and you will listen. And everyone kind of shuts up and like, okay, we'll look at the report. And they realize like, oh, iClone got past our defenses and was able to get on world through some backwater means. And we kind of let him, ooh, and we kind of missed him the whole time. My bad, my bad. And everyone's like, ooh, okay, we'll back it off a little bit. And Eisenhorn is like, okay, I need full support, understanding, and, you know, everything that I possibly need during this mission. He asked the main guy and the head custodian, be like, hey, let's go talk on the side. They bring him to the back room, and there the head custodian leads him to a room that has him, his chambers, and a certain individual that seems to be very combative. The high custodian brings them there, like, okay, we'll relent, we'll give you everything you need, all the resources you possibly want, we'll help you in this investigation to make sure whatever happened to our noble people, those people are brought to justice, but on one condition though, this guy has to go with you. They point to the boy known as Chastner Fishing. Hopefully I'm saying his name right, and hopefully I'm saying his title right. Adeptus Erebits, something like that. He's basically a space sheriff. He's responsible for this system to make sure that everything's going all right. He has a large amount of authority, not to the same amount as an Inquisitor like Eisenhorn, but he's pretty important as well. He has access to a lot of things that can help in different ways, knowing more local places and stuff like that. Something that could actually be kind of useful for Inquisitor, but he's being thrust upon it. He's puffing out his chest like, yeah, I'm pointing to, what's up, bro? Eisenhorn is like, sweet baby Jesus, Lord save me, but I'll just bring him along just so this deal goes through and I don't have to worry about him, so yay. And they're like, okay, where do we go? Okay, let's go to the morgue first to go check out these bodies. So Eisenhorn and his companions, Uber and Fishing now, are heading down to the morgue. They're getting ready to investigate the bodies to see if there's any noticeable markings, any noticeable remnants of something they can use to figure out where they want to go and, you know, try to point in the right direction. Well, they're kind of being escorted by Fishing. They try driving them there. They kind of just obviously in the back, wishing they weren't dealing with him. But unfortunately, due to the circumstances, they just have to play ball. They get there, they talk to the head surgeon, talking about like, oh yeah, you know, those guys didn't really have too much on their possessions, so there's not too much of a note there. They go investigate the bodies. On of iClone's men, there's absolutely nothing. They have no discernible markings, no discernible features on their faces. Anything that possibly could be shown of anything is said to be like kind of scorched off with some torch or a smelter gun. A smelter torch, I believe they said exactly. So yeah, so they just completely blank. There's not too much to them. They're like, oh, can't get too much there. They move over to iClone though. They're looking there, looking up and down, and one of the first things they notice on his neck is a chaos marking, and just looking at it makes someone visibly sick. And Eisenhorn makes a very interesting, you know, note here. It's like, oh yeah, I learned about this because a previous companion of mine told me about it. They've been in an insane asylum for the last 5 years roughly, and last time I heard, I think they chewed off their fingers. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, let's move on. And that just left there. And it shows that Eisenhorn is a heartless motherfucker. I know earlier I said that he has a lot of emotions and this and that, which he does, and that does get in the way a lot, but at the same time, he does really hold to the term of Inquisitor of being like, yeah, I don't care, let's keep on going. It's an ebb and flow depending on how long he's been with the person. He kind of offhandedly like, huh, yeah, and then continues. So that kind of gives you the idea of what the Inquisitor really is. So they keep investigating iClone, they're looking all around, and one of them notes like, hey, there's a little marking on his finger, a little X, that's interesting. I was like, oh, is this another chaos marking? What could it be? Could it be this? Maybe it was some tattoo or something? They're looking around, Eisenhorn's thinking like, huh, why? He's been known to run with some cultist people, maybe it's this, maybe it's like, oh wait, maybe it could be something like, you know, extraterrestrial possibly, maybe this. And he realized, he looks and was like, wait, there's something to it. And we have Fishing over there kind of like touch it, and a small little snake kind of just pokes out and goes giant flying at them, going towards the, the neck, trying to kill him. It's kind of like a fail-safe that it seems that our boy Iclone was trying to activate before Eisenhorn gave him a new hole in the back of his head. So yeah, and so that Xenos alien snake is now running all about the place trying to kill him. It's almost like a one of those face huggers from Alien, so it's just rolling around the place like, oh hell, everyone starts panicking. Eisenhorn doesn't have a gun anymore because the gun he did previously have, he returned it to the body of Ibn, so that was the only gun he really had on him, and now it's like, ooh, okay, so he's just with a bone saw going around trying to hack the thing to pieces, and they are doing a piss poor job. Fishing is shooting all around, missing, making a goddamn fool himself. Eisenhorn and the goddamn attending that was there, the kind of a mortuary guy, kind of luckily pinned down the snake, saw off its head, and then drop it into like a vial of acid. So after that whole little scuffle with the snake, then Eisenhorn looks at the attending, is basically like, hey, you're doing fishing's job, bending the fishing, you're actually incompetent. Fishing gets a little butthurt about it, and they're like, okay, what the hell do we do next? So after dealing with the stuff in the morgue, they're like, hey, there's one guy of Iclone's that Eisenhorn knocked out originally during the initial scuffle with Iclone when he, blew off his head before that, and let's go investigate him. So they get there, they talk to him, they interrogate him. It's like, who are you? Where did you come from? What's your profession? What's your relation to Iclone? All this. And he's like, I do not remember a single thing. And Eisenhorn realizes, oh, he was probably like mind controlled via like Iclone's like psychic powers. So it's not really under his, full self-autonomy as a man. And he's like, oh, okay, so I'm not too useful. He's like, what did I do? Well, I don't remember. Who are you? What happened? He's like, huh, you tried to kill me, an inquisitor of mankind, of the Imperium. And he's like, the guy realizes like, oh, I'm screwed. And he's like, yeah, there's nothing on his person, nothing, so he's completely useless here. He came from one of the previous worlds that Iclone had been on, the Thraken Primaris. I'm pretty sure I'm saying that right. And he's like, okay, well, you're not too useful to me, so Fishing, do whatever you want to do with him. Fishing's like, okay, well, we'll murder him at dawn. And I'm not sure what dawn means in this world, but he's like, yep, Eisenhorn, that sounds good to me. Heads out. Once again, showing another aspect of being brutal. He could have been like, oh no, but he didn't really wasn't on his full self-control. No, but he's like, yeah, that guy probably deserves it, and walks out. He can be a very cold-hearted bastard. Eisenhorn's like, you know what, let's just break for lunch. Let's try to regroup and gather. Like, let me look at the information I've gotten from Loneling and stuff like that. Let's put it all together. So they go to some random cafe, get some fish. Amos and Eisenhorn are kind of hanging out, and like, let's look at the transmissions. They're looking there, and they see that Iclone is actually sending and receiving some logs from, outer space, from some other place, and they've determined that they can get a rough location of where Iclone was going to go next, because there's been short transmissions that were like 6 seconds, so it was basically like the ship that dropped him off and they were just still in orbit. But there was another transmission that was like 12 minutes and like 30 seconds, and they were like, huh, so that probably came from another system, from another world. So let's think about it. And there's like Thraken Primaris, I believe I'm saying that right, which was a world that is, very giant, kind of figurehead world for this entire system that Eisenhorn is like patrolling in. And he's like, oh, well, maybe not that one, because that's where Iclone came from. And there's Cobalt 2, which is another world that could fit in the range within 12 minutes and like 30 seconds. And it's like, probably not that one, because it's an empty world with just like one outpost for the Imperium. So probably not that. And he thinks about Gudrun. It was like, okay, there's a lot of like mercantile traders there, caught a lot of points, maybe either jumping off point to another world, or maybe someone there could be doing something, so maybe that could be the most likely option. So yeah, and they also learned that they seem that the word Pontus is very important during like going through all the transmissions. That keyword probably popped up a little bit, and they're like, huh, that's also interesting. I wonder what that could relate to. But it's like, you know what, let's go see this place that was actually receiving the messages. They learn about it. They're like, hey, this is probably where he hung out when he was here before he decided to go to the whole cryogenic chamber and do all that business over there with that weird casket looking thing. And like, okay, let's go check that out. And they get up to leave, and Fishing is ready there to kind of take him there. He doesn't want to let him out of his sight, because he is kind of responsible for looking over them, even though he doesn't really can do shit with Eisenhorn, but c'est la vie. So they get into the car and head to this residential place that was receiving and sending the messages for Iclone. So they head to this residential area, but they realize they probably have faced some not so happy people to see him, because Iclone probably didn't go alone, and being any sort of association with this guy is essentially meaning, yep, I am an enemy of mankind. So they're like, they probably don't want to come alive or calmly, so let's get ready for a fight just in case. Fisher pulls out his giant shotgun, gives a weapon to Eisenhorn since he doesn't really have one, and they get ready for this fight. Eisenhorn tells Amos, like, hey, stick back for this one because this might get a little bit hairy. They walk up to the residence. Fishing has a level of clearance, and so he's like a space deputy, so he has a way to get around like securities and shut down like the security systems, open the doors and stuff like that. Something that's a lot easier for him to do and a lot more accessible since he's actually the sheriff of this kind of solar system, this whole place here. So he's able to get through it easier, a little faster than the Eisenhorn would. So it's a little convenient that he was here. They knock down all the defenses. Eisenhorn still wants to check to make sure there's no traps because he's probably had a couple bad experiences in the past. He tosses a coin through there, making sure there's no like lasers that were tripwires or something like that. Nothing happens. Fishing then announces like, hey, we're here, come up with your hands up. All that business to be like, hey, we're gonna enter, don't kill us. And they decide to just start blasting the two. That's essentially what happens. They hit the deck. They realize, oh, we're going to be in a fight. So Fisher gets a little happy. He racks a shotgun, goes charging through the front door, ready to take on literally every single one of them. Eisenhorn's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be on my Sam Fisher type beat. And let me crawl up this goddamn like gutter and let me go to the second floor. Yeah, as he's doing it, he hears like Fisher screaming, yelling, shotgun bolts are getting blasted with different lasers, all that's going to happen downstairs. He's like, cool. He makes it to the second story, and then he enters through a little balcony way. He enters through the balcony into this bedroom, where he sees a call girl seeming coming away from the restroom. It seems to be like after a sort of pleasantries have been, exchanged and stuff like that. I don't see her. He's like, who the hell are you? Tell me your name. And she's like, oh, what? And he's like, excuse me? He tried to use the will on her a little bit, but nothing happened. She's like, who are you? And then one of these guys from the outer was like, hey, they found us. They come busting in. And he sees Eisenhorn. It's like, oh, you're not my friend. Eisenhorn takes him down. He's like, shit, okay. And he then asks this girl, like, who are you? She's like, I'm, like Al. She gives it like a nickname, like Ellie or something like that. It's like, give me your real damn name. Like it says Elizabeth Beckwith, aka the best character in the series. We'll get into that, but she's like, I'm this, okay? It's like, okay, cool. Another guy comes in, he takes him down. A third guy comes in, starts shooting at Eisenhorn. He's like, oh hell, it's gonna be a little bit dangerous. So he rolls around on the bed. He's trying to get in a way to dispose of this guy, but luckily for him, the girl Elizabeth is a little bit useful in the situation and knocks down the guy and takes him out. And he's like, see, I helped you. I'm not part of them. Please don't murder me. And he's like, we'll see about that. And after all this, they clear out the rest of the room, and the fishing downstairs has got one guy captured. Luckily for them, they can interrogate him and see what's going on here. He gets to the guy, and he tries to play a little bit nicer initially. He's like, okay, tell me your name. Tell me where you came from. Tell me your relation to iClone. How did you get here? All of this, and that. And he's like, nope, not telling you. Nope, you can kill me. Nope, I'm not going to say anything. And Eisenhower's like, okay, I try to play nicely to begin with. Now let me, exert a little more will onto him. What I did there, a little, yeah. But yes, he uses his psycho abilities. He tells, Fishing to like, hey, step back for a second. I'm going to do something. And Fishing's like, yeah, whatever. So he takes like a half step back, and Eisenhorn is like, hey, tell me your name, using his will. And Fishing is the first one to respond, like, Godwin Fishing. And he's like, oh, I see. And then he kind of steps another couple steps back, like, okay, that was a little bit embarrassing. And he's like, okay, whatever. Eisenhorn looks at him and asks for his name. He gets a response, doesn't really matter at this moment. So he just tells his name, is like, what's your relation to iClone? And he's like, I do not know. He's like, tell me your relation to iClone. And he's like, I don't know who he is. And he's like, oh, he never directly dealt with him or doesn't know who he really is. Okay, that's whatever. So that's going to be a dead end, no matter what. And he's like, okay, what's Pontus? And the guy's about to say something. Oh, Pontus, and eye pops out, blood streaming out of his nose. Man's head just blows up internally. He's like, oh, that's someone doesn't want us to know about it. He was like rigged to die, essentially. It had like a kill switch just in case that word came onto him. So I was like, oh, damn. And Fishing is like, hell, we don't know anything. We don't know what to do now. That was like one lead. Eisenhorn looks at him like, you fool. We now know that Pontus is a really important word that nobody wants us to figure out. Dummy. And when that happens, when he says finishing that, explosion happens within the residence hall, which might not seem too extreme because they both survive, but it explodes and opens the outside elements of the world that aren't protected by the main like hub, everything. So it's very cold, very drastic. It is during the dormant months, so it is like sub-zero temperatures, Mortal Kombat, and they're kind of like, ooh, that's not good to try to survive, and someone tried to kill him. That when what Ponce was said, it basically like, hey, just level the place and make sure everything's fine. So luckily Eisenhorn gets Fishing out of there. They fall to the ground outside. They're like, well, someone doesn't want us to learn about this, but unluckily for them, we survive. They all gather around, they kind of get everything mixed together, make sure they call in more of the custodians to kind of clean it all up, to set up the barriers so there's no more of the outside actual world coming into it. They're able to get Elizabeth down, where they wrapped her up on a whole bunch of like heat gloves and stuff like that, trying to keep her warm because she's basically subjected to like Antarctic temperatures for a little bit, so she comes out just fine. During all this, the Crusones really want to try Elizabeth because she's the only person left alive essentially with tied to iClone, and they want her dead. Luckily for them, not for them, but for looking for Elizabeth, Eisenhorn's like, hey, I could use her actually for other reasons, but she's really important and I can interrogate her and something else, but let's not talk about that. So he's able to yank her away from them using the Inquisitor status, so they have to be like, hell, okay, I guess. And he brings her onto the ship because he knows that there's something very special about him, and he kind of wants to learn about what she has going on about herself. So while on the ship, the first thing they do is like they place Elizabeth over there, get a little bit comfy before Eisenhorn starts interrogating her essentially, and like, hey, let's go figure out this word Pontus. And they're like, let's go cross-reference Pontus with 1,000 different places, 1,000 different ways, adjectives as a verb, as a noun, all this to see where it comes up anywhere within the system with like hubris within Thracian Primaris, Lord, I cannot pronounce that, with Cobalt, with Gudrun, and all this, trying to see where that name could pop up. They see a bunch of things, which is a very popular like surname or like first name or whatever. It's used in both cases. So it's like, hell, what can we do? So they're looking at all this. And there's one thing I noticed on a reread of it, I kind of looked skimming it over for this video, was that even though this is kind of a detective noir style-esque book, Eisenhorn doesn't really do too much detective work. Here is like the biggest ass pull I've ever seen. It's like, of course, wait, Pontus Glaw, that heretic guy from 200 years ago. And it's like, of course, that makes so much sense. He was a heretic. This guy was a heretic. Easy, bingo, bango, bosh, we got it. And you realize, like, there was the biggest ass pull. I reread it a couple times because I was like, was it like a kind of inkling anywhere? But no, he kind of ass pulled it. There was no cool deductions. Like, finding out about the world of Gunrun, the place that Pontus originally was, came a little bit because, well, it used to, simple skills. 12 minutes 30 seconds from away from him really received the point. Probably not the world he already came from, probably not the nothing world, so it's probably Gunrun. Something like that, something simple of deduction. But him just ass pulling the whole name of the guy, I was like, oh, cool, I guess we're just like, we're gonna deal with that. Sorry, it's a little thing that kind of pissed me off, but yeah, whatever. So after the biggest ass pull of the century, they're like, okay, let's go get like Pontus. He was in Gudrun. Let's go to Gudrun. So he's like, hey, Midas, I need to get transportation to Gudrun. Get a spirit trader, a rogue trader, someone to get me there fast. We need to get there within the next couple of days, or start getting the move along at least. And he was like, Midas, like, okay, I'll see what I could do. I'll start sending out transmissions. I'll see who we can hire. So he goes and do that, and then Eisenhorn's like, okay, let me go interrogate Beckwin, because this whole thing with her is kind of funny, kind of weird. He walks into her like kind of not holding cell, but kind of just in the passenger area where she's kind of holed up for now. He looks at her, he's like, hey, stand up. And he's like, what? Like, okay. And she stands up. I was like, okay, you can sit down. The way he says, sit down. And he tried to put her side of world, like, actually strong on her, and she's like, what the hell are you doing? Like, what the hell do you want from me? Okay, sit down. Talks to her, learns that she lived a very hard life and that she's been just jumping from place to place. Hubris is not her original home world. She was like from Gathra, something like that. She's from another world they never visit, but she's from somewhere else. And she's like, yeah, no one's really liked me. I've kind of just been trying to make my way in this world. And he does a little more stuff, trying to force her to do stuff, trying to exert her will. And he realizes, oh, she's a blank. And what that means, she is a nullifying presence to the warp. So to psychers, to anything that's warp related, or like any type of thing that could be influenced by the warp, there's something touched, all this business, she just turns it off essentially. She's a nullifying presence that gives off a very strong aura around her that gives everyone the ick essentially. So people who aren't psychers, people who are psychers, everyone around her just don't like her being around. So that's why she's lived a very hard life, because just this thing she was innately born with has just turned off everyone to anyone liking her. So she's like, yeah, I lived a hard life. And Eisenhorn doesn't tell her right away about this because that might just ruin someone. So it's like, okay, yeah, I'll probably have more questions for you later, but yeah, thanks. If you probably want to stay with me, I have a job for you and I want to talk about it. And she's like a call girl at this point. She's like, oh, the Inquisitor Eisenhorn wants a job from a call girl. Oh, I didn't realize Inquisitors had needs like that. And she's like, not like that. There's something important about you that like this. He gets a little flustered, like, no, you fool. Okay. So they talk about that, and he tells her, basically, you can either come with me and take my job, or I can leave you here in Hubris where they want to execute you, since you're the only living member of like Icon's posse, even though she really wasn't. Well, she wasn't at all. She just happened to be in the wrong place, wrong time, her life essentially. So she's like, I'll take the deal. Okay. And he's like, okay, I'll do some more interview later. And they get up and leave, and Eisenhorn just is trying to like regather his thoughts really quick and wondering what to do next. At this point, Midas comes back in and he's like, hey, I've secured us transportation to gun run. It's from the ship called the Esne. Well, I'm going to mess up that name so many times, but it's from this ship. And there's a sprint trader. He'll be able to get this within the next couple of days. So we're good on transportation. Eisenhorn's like, thank goodness, that's good. Okay, let me gather up some things so I'm ready for this trip. And around the same time, that's when they learn that the boy Fishig is going to be joining them. Yippee! The custodians of the world are like, hey, we'll let you leave this planet, to continue your investigation and to find the people who did this, bring them justice, because half our nobles just died in one night, and we kind of want that person to be brought to justice. But you have to bring Fishig, so, we can keep tabs to make sure everything's going fine. Then Eisenhorn could have been puffing out his chest like, nope, I'm not going to take him. I am an inquisitor of mankind. I don't need to deal with this. I don't need you. Stop bugging me, essentially. But he realizes, well, once again, it's probably easier to play ball because, well, he has the full authority and they have to listen to him. If just not bringing Fishing along, Fishing can still follow him and keep tabs on him. And Eisenhorn comes to the conclusion that it's probably easier for him and a lot more convenient if he's able to keep tabs on Fishing, keep him eyesight at all times, make sure what he's doing so there's not a monkey wrench thrown into his plans. He's like, okay, I'll relent. You can tag along. So in the next couple of days, they're kind of getting stuff ready, and then Eisenhorn wants to conduct an auto seance, which essentially they tap into the warp and they kind of feel the lasting presence on things that have been left behind, someone who's dead, to get some information and see if they can get some key aspects for his investigation. It is a very draining process. You once again allowing the warp to come through into you and use it as a conduit. So, and people surrounded by it are using Azel to help amplify or to help, touch and deal with the warp. So everyone is very heavily affected with it. So him and Lowling, his astropath, do this. They bring a couple of stuff that was the key things of iClone. If they were looking at it, like a gun, a piece of clothing, stuff like this, they conduct the auto seance. They go through it. Eisenhorn in the middle of it touches the gun. He gets like a sharp pain because it was a very aggressive thing in life. So both of them kind of recoil like, oh, let's not do that again. So they go through it. They're going through all these possessions. And then through all of this, they come to the word Demon Summoner, which I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly as I said it really fast, so people don't make fun of me. So please don't make fun of me. Yeah, this word could be probably important, maybe not. So they give it to Amos, who could probably use it in the future. Maybe not right now, but if there's some type of keyword or password or like thing that they need to activate or open, it could be really useful. And then Amos basically has photogenic memory, so he's going to remember it regardless. So Eisenhorn passes on to him just in case. So yeah, and then after the auto seance, after passing on the word to Amos, they were very tired, very drained. Lowling returns back to his quarters where he's like all gangly and sick. Eisenhorn is drained as well, even though he's a psyker himself and all of this. It takes a big toll on people. At this moment, Midas catches up with him and be like, hey, by the way, we went through Vibin's stuff, but we didn't find any sort of possessions that she possibly could have wanted, anything she would have been wanting to bury with her, or even how to bury her. And so they come to the conclusion that she just wanted to travel the stars and leave the kind of slums they found her in, so they will bury her in the stars. So they will do the kind of space burial when they have the moment to. That night, Eisenhorn is plagued with some weird dreams, nightmares, shadowy figures. He possibly hears Vibin's voice, and he's like wakes up from it. He's been having nightmares his whole life, essentially dealing with people like chasing after iClone, and then all of a sudden a weird, shady, naked, weird-looking guy pops up, and now he's dealing with Vibin's voice. So he's a very scarred man, already at the age of 42. So he's gonna be in a long run of these type of dreams, these type of situations. So he's like, oh, okay, whatever. He gets up and then he learns from Midas that the ship is here. And then he's like, okay, let's start boarding it. Let's make contact with the main guy and let's start heading to Gunrun. They get there, they load up everything, and then him and Midas get out and they meet this guy, this Maxilla. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Once again, so many names I'm going to get wrong, but he's a very energetic, eccentric guy that's very happy and very eager to know that an Inquisitor, especially Eisenhorn's here, seems to be like, hey, I can more than gladly take you guys anywhere you would possibly want. Kind of hidden behind the smile. I was like, this is probably good for him and Sun Wave. He gets good with an Inquisitor, then he probably has a little more leeway in something. So it's kind of like, okay, you can get the idea. Like, this is not just a purely out of the goodness of his heart or just for the money type of transaction. There's also something else with it. So they load on everything. They determine that, okay, we're good to go. And then they blast off to Gunrun, ready to continue this little adventure of theirs. And that's where I ended for now. Goodness gracious, this has been a long video to record. It's just like 1 of 4 parts. Of course, this first one's a little bit longer because a little more like explaining why I got into it, and also a little intro in the beginning of me like reading the whole intro to the Grimdark world and stuff like that. It is a lot more intensive video than I've made before. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be exciting. I'm really happy that the video is actually being made. I've talked about it for the last 2, 3, 4 months at this point, and I have the whole book here. I have the whole omnibus. I read all the omnibus. I have Gaunt's Ghost. I have the book somewhere in my backpack back there. I also have Kane, Caiaphas Kane. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I've gotten really into Warhammer. I really like it. I want to talk about it. I love yapping. I've still been doing D&D stuff. I'm not like dropping D&D, but this is just something I've been really into this past 6 months, roughly. Yeah, since like November, December of last year. Yeah, no, it's like about 6 months. So yeah, pretty happy, pretty excited about that. I'm getting into new stuff. I'm happy. I moved recently. I've talked about in the previous one, so trying to get things situated there. So that's why it's been kind of a long between the last post, because I asked to do some stuff here, and life has been changing, but things are looking good. I'm very happy with making videos that I actually have the opportunity to spend time of my day of making these stupid videos that maybe 50 people watch, if I'm lucky. But hey, that is YouTube. I'm not doing this to be YouTube famous, boys. I like yapping, and this gives me a time to yap freely. But please tell me in the comments if there's something you like about the video. Do more of this, do less of that. I'm kind of trying to mix in between like telling you throughout the story, but also giving you my thoughts. But I'm not sure if that's what you guys want. I'm not sure if you guys purely just want to hear my opinions on the first book, and so just kind of skip the summary, or if you just want to hear more what happens and kind of leave out your kind of personal biases or kind of stuff like the kind of like little rant I went on with the whole Pontus Glaw kind of ass pull thing. There's that. So just tell me how you guys feel. It really helps the point of the video, and it means I can actually make a more oriented, directed, and more focused video than kind of all over the place. I understand this first one's going to be kind of crude throughout the kind of explanation of the story. So yeah, just tell me, and that can lead to better videos. But besides that, I hope you guys enjoy the video, wherever how long. Hopefully it's not like a 30-minute video, but it probably will be. So it's probably take a day or two to edit and post. I am not a YouTuber per se, you know, who would have thought that stupid little boy who wants to make some funny little videos, and now it's into like some whole video essay territory. So yeah, it's gonna be great. So I'm doing a big boy software now. What's it called? DaVinci. So that's wonderful, and that whole thing. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoy it. Please like and subscribe if you really enjoy the content I'm doing. Please tell me if you want me to continue about talking about EISENHORN and Warhammer, or if not, like, hey, little bro, stick in your lane, stick to D&D, and then I'll just do that, dude. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching again. Hope you all had a good day. Go for a walk. It's good for yourself mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I will talk to y'all later. See ya.